The facts hit league offices before sunrise. Fox was offering more for NFL rights than CBS ever had. Executives stared at the number. If Tagliabue said yes, an upstart network would steal Sunday from a legacy giant and reset the price of football. If he said no, the league risked leaving billions on the table. To understand why Tagliabue was willing to gamble the NFL's television soul, we need to go back to a commissioner who treated media rights like venture capital. His bet wasn't about TV, it was about leverage over networks, over labor, and over the future revenue curve. The stakes were simple. Television money was the league's lifeblood, and the 1980s had taught owners how fragile that stream could be. Ratings had softened, labor war scarred both sides, and the league's traditional partners negotiated like they had all the leverage. Tagliabue saw a different map. He knew an outsider might pay a premium to buy relevance, and he was prepared to weaponize that hunger. Here's what happened. In 1993, Fox, an entertainment disruptor without a deep sports pedigree, put a bid on the NFC package that blew past CBS. The number stunned everyone. Owners in small markets saw security. Big markets saw upside. Traditionalists saw heresy. Tagliabue didn't blink. He centralized the negotiation, kept committee chatter to a whisper, and framed the choice in plain economics: accept the legacy discount or ignite a bidding war that would lift every boat. The decision changed the tone of every room he walked into. When Fox won the NFC, CBS exited the NFL, and then fought back years later by outbidding NBC for the AFC. ESPN consolidated cable with exclusive primetime rights. NBC, shut out, later returned by paying up for Sunday night. Networks were no longer partners, they were competitors underwriting the league's growth. Tagliabue had turned rights into an auction, and auctions into policy. For players, this flood of guaranteed national revenue was the spine of a salary cap system tied to league income. For owners, it meant predictability. The cap wouldn't work without a floor of TV money everyone shared equally, and Tagliabue used that certainty to sell labor peace. Meanwhile, what nobody knew at the time was how the Fox deal would ripple far beyond checks and schedules. Production values jumped, regional branding sharpened, and Sundays felt like national events even in small markets. The immediate impact was obvious. Billions committed, franchise valuations climbing, but the ripple effects were deeper. With a richer rights base, Tagliabue could greenlight expansion into new markets and push for modern stadiums without risking competitive balance. Networks that had once dictated terms now pitched innovations to keep their packages. The league launched its own media properties, planting seeds for the NFL network and digital control. There was a cost. CBS affiliates howled. Some fans felt displaced by the channel shuffle. Traditional rivalries shifted time slots, yet inside the Park Avenue conference room, the calculus held: scarcity plus competition equals pricing power. Tagliabue kept the packages scarce, the windows distinct, and the dance partners hungry. While that was happening in the broadcast towers, owners were realizing they'd gained something priceless. Time, the money arrived predictably. The season felt inevitable, and the commissioner had bought freedom to think bigger. The Fox checks did more than pad bank accounts. They gave Tagliabue a lever in the one room that could break the league, the bargaining table. The stakes were human and financial. Players wanted a real market for their work and security after they were done playing. Owners needed cost certainty after a decade of courtroom bruises. Fans needed Sundays to feel inevitable again. If this moment failed, the NFL could slide back into strike seasons and empty stadiums. Here's what happened. In 1993, after years of antitrust battles and a union that had decertified to sue, Tagliabue and NFLPA leader Gene Upshaw outlined a trade: free agency for players, a salary cap for owners, and a benefits package big enough to change lives. The cap wouldn't be a hard ceiling in theory. It would be tied to national revenues, especially the TV money every team shared. Free agency wouldn't be chaos, it would be governed by rules that still let teams keep core stars. And the benefits? More than $1 billion in pensions, health coverage, and post-career support, the most robust package in pro sports at the time. The action was deliberate. Tagliabue centralized authority, cut through committee drift, and kept the focus on numbers everyone could verify. He used guaranteed TV money as the floor that made a cap fair and enforceable. He sold parity as a business asset. When small market teams can keep up, every regional broadcast feels big, and national advertisers pay like it's the Super Bowl every week. Meanwhile, he told owners the quiet part out loud: labor peace multiplies the value of your franchise more than any single star can. The impact was immediate. The 1993 CBA locked in predictability, and extensions followed. 4 renewals during his tenure with no strikes and no lockouts. For players, free agency turned into real leverage. Reggie White chose his team. Stars tested the market. role players discovered mid-tier deals that hadn't existed. For owners, the cap linked spending to real revenues and kept the arms race from blowing up balance sheets. For the league, the new system produced something broadcasters love: close games, rotating contenders, and storylines that didn't rely on one city. What nobody knew at the time was how deeply this would stabilize every other decision. Stadium negotiations got easier when mayors could read a 10-year revenue forecast. Expansion became less risky because the newcomers would share the same TV floor and face the same spending rules. Even scheduling took on a sharper edge because the any given Sunday promise was now a model, not a slogan. There were complications. Veterans worried free agency would squeeze the middle once teams learned to game the cap. Agents hunted loopholes. Some owners grumbled that player costs kept rising anyway because shared revenue rose so fast. And yes, the cap forced painful cuts every March that felt cold to loyal fan bases. But the broader calculus held. The money grew, the fight shrank, and the season became a metronome. Meanwhile, Tagliabue protected the architecture. He enforced the cap, kept committees aligned, and treated grievances like maintenance, not crisis. He and Upshaw built a working relationship built on respect, more than warmth. They didn't need friendship to do business. They needed a common spreadsheet and a clock that never stopped on Sundays. This was the moment everything changed for valuation. When you remove the threat of work stoppages, the discount rate owners use to value future cash flows drops. That sounds dry. In practice, it means a team bought for $150 million could chart a path to $1 billion without winning a thing, just by being inside a machine that prints predictable shared national revenue. Tagliabue didn't invent capitalism. He made the NFL bankable. With labor quiet and rights money humming, Tagliabue pushed the map outward. The stakes were both geographic and cultural. Could the league add teams without breaking quality? Could it build stadiums without bleeding local politics? And could American football become more than an American sport? Here's what happened. In 1995, the league planted flags in Charlotte and Jacksonville. The Panthers and Jaguars weren't random dots. They were growth markets where sponsors were hungry and TV affiliates would tilt the grid. 4 years later, after the original Browns moved to Baltimore, Cleveland got its team back with a modern stadium deal and fresh expansion payments that fattened shared coffers. In 2002, Houston returned to the league, restoring a major market and anchoring the South. 4 teams in 7 years, from 28 to 32, and still the game stayed close. While that was happening, a quiet construction boom reshaped Sundays. Roughly 20 new stadiums opened through the 1990s and early 200s, many through public-private deals. Owners argued for revenue streams, suites, clubs, naming rights that didn't exist in the concrete bowls of the 1970s. Tagliabue's office didn't swing the hammers, but the league's stability and shared money underwrote bank loans and bond issuances. Cities signed on because the NFL could deliver events that looked like civic holidays. Teams signed on because modern buildings turned every home date into a balance sheet event. The impact rippled beyond seats. New stadiums tuned the in-person experience to match the TV product Fox had elevated. Better sightlines, bigger screens, more data, more brand integrations. Local revenues rose, but because the cap was tied to league revenues, the top line pulled the locker rooms along. That tension, local riches married to a national cap, pushed owners to keep sharing on the big buckets. Tagliabue guarded that principle, knowing a rising tide only matters if the boats stay tied together. Then came the reach beyond borders. Tagliabue backed the World League of American Football, later NFL Europe, as a bridge into global markets and a laboratory for rules officials and player development. It didn't mint money, and nobody pretended it did. It minted intel: which cities would show up, which broadcasters would commit, which kickoff times played in 2 hemispheres. Meanwhile, preseason games overseas and regular season experiments widened the league's footprint and sponsor decks. The direct revenue was modest. The strategic value was leverage. When you can offer brands and networks a global platform, you don't negotiate like a regional league. There were costs, expansion risks, diluting rosters. Some taxpayers bristled at stadium subsidies. NFL Europe never became a profit center, and critics called it a vanity project. But Tagliabue treated it like venture R&D. The wins would come later. Broadcast windows that flexed internationally. Fan clubs in London, a pipeline of officials trained in faster games. You don't get a London game day without a decade of groundwork. Unknown to many fans, these moves protected the core product. New markets refreshed the schedule, new buildings stabilized balance sheets, international tests opened future bids, and every step rested on the same scaffolding: a cap anchored to shared money, and media partners kept hungry through scarcity. By the time NBC returned with Sunday Night Football and ESPN took Monday nights, Tagliabue had something rare in sports: options. He could say no because he'd already banked growth through expansion fees, stadium economics, and a brand that now traveled. Owners noticed. Franchises didn't just earn more, they were worth more. Buyers weren't paying for wins, they were buying into a system that flattened risk. Here's the quiet legacy of that global ambition. It taught the league to think in seasons and decades at the same time. You play for Week 12, but you plan for 2012. Tagliabue's NFL learned to do both. Stability had cracks. Antitrust scars lingered from the 80s, shaping how Tagliabue packaged rights and protected revenue sharing without looking like a cartel. Meanwhile, the sport's hidden costs were accruing. Concussions weren't yet a nightly headline, but the lawsuits and science were coming. The business model he fortified, shared TV money, predictable caps, expansion fees, would later help fund massive concussion settlements and protocol overhauls. His labor peace lowered risk. Neurological risk raised it. The bill arrived after he left, but the cash cushion was built on his watch. He made football bankable and the bill payable. For how those foundations fed today's $100 billion media wars and international push, watch our next deep dive. Subscribe for untold sports business stories.